And we are back with another episode of the Julius Files. I am your host, Jason Julius, and welcome to the water cooler for small business. Why do I say the water cooler for small business? Because I am small business, and I say it like that because I came from nothing, and so much of quote unquote small business gets into building something from nothing, going out and getting a little bit of training or developing a little bit of know-how, and having this bright idea that you're just going to jump into entrepreneurship and start walking that path, and I guess see where it leads in general. But 50% of America is small business, and when I think about who this podcast is for, obviously, I don't have any background in big business, so I'm not trying to talk about big business or even offering perspective there. But I do think that my perspective on living a happy, healthy life still applies to the people that works for big business. But the podcast itself was meant to reach out to small business owners to help them achieve that freedom, which I believe is by and large what got people into business to begin with, and to give those employees working with small business a little bit of perspective to help move those small businesses along, and for them to actually step up in their own careers, because the more profitable that they can help a small business become, the more valuable they become, the more that working for that small business becomes beneficial to their own vision, fitting inside of the vision of the small business entrepreneur. Today's we're gonna label today's episode "Delegate for Freedom," because again, when I left my job at Chrysler. I had almost 14 years in, and obviously I've talked about it. There's a bigger story there as to why I left, but ultimately, when I left for one word: freedom. I have so much appreciation for my union brothers and sisters that I left in that previous chapter of my life, but I did feel like my efforts and focus directed in another direction could lead me to a different version of life, that I just felt like I could produce more with my own efforts, or with my ability to lead a group of people outside of that environment, because there was nothing wrong. It's, I don't want to say noble. Honest day's work for an honest day's pay. There's nothing wrong with working in a factory and working with your hands. That's that deep blue collar background that I have, but everybody has their own path, and for the purpose of not having regrets in life, I definitely encourage people to walk their own path. But let's get into this, because there's a couple principles that, you probably get a couple people being like, yeah, no shit, Jason, that's obvious. No, I get that what I'm going to say, it might seem obvious, especially to those of us that employ a large level of common sense in their life, because before I even realized that I had a certain amount of quote unquote intelligence, I long said that you could drop me off on the hood and I'd get out alive, because I have a certain level of common sense, and I'm not afraid of those different environments. And so I saw myself, I guess, as, from what I'm finding out now, emotionally intelligent, having common sense, having people skills, but the IQ intelligence was something that I didn't give myself enough credit for, and that's an evolution. If you don't want to be a dummy, then don't make dumb decisions. Don't act like a dummy. Pick up a book, read something, and search out people that have been there, done that, and heed their words. Getting back to that common sense, one of the surest ways to tell that you have a bad owner or a bad manager or a bad mindset with one of those individuals as an owner or a manager is to hear them say, I can just do it myself so that I know that it'll actually get done. That is not a good sign that you have any business in management or leadership, because that's just not the way it works. I am a big proponent of coaching as part of leadership, And what I'm getting at is that when you're actually doing the work, you're leading with doing it with your hands. But when you are as a manager, or more specifically as an entrepreneur themselves that is searching for freedom, I'm like, well, doing it yourself, you're never going to get that freedom. And it is very much from my perspective, ears, eyes, and mouth in that order. Because then you have ears, eyes, mouth, and hands. And when you hire people, you are hiring them generally from a small business perspective to work with their hands, use their mouth to communicate, use their eyes to watch what they're doing, use their ears to listen for what they should be doing. And it's complete opposite from a manager's perspective and from an owner's perspective. And it's one of the things that when I look back at my low turnover rates, it was something that has just come natural to me. But the point is that I say ears, eyes, and then mouth, because your ears can hear 360. Your eyes can only see what's in front of you. And your mouth should be used for coaching and directing. Too many people seem to forget that if you want something to do something, if you want someone to do something a very specific way and do that consistently, you're going to have to train them, which means you're going to have to use your mouth, not your hands. So when I walk into one of my operations or I sit down with one of my teams, I'm using my ears to listen for what is going on, because it's that input that your ears are ultimately going to give you input from everywhere to be telling you where you should be directing your eyes and where you should be using your mouth. I don't think enough people, managers or entrepreneurs or otherwise, think of it in those terms to think about where they are best utilizing their time and their resources. And that's why I said, to me, this is common sense. And if you are doing exceptionally well in business, it will most likely be common sense to you. But you can never forget that if you want to enjoy the freedom and the fruits of the labor that you were after inside of your business, I mean, how many times have all of us looked and been like, well, if we could just clone ourselves, we wouldn't have this problem? To which I say, then do that. Then clone yourself. Well, how are you going to clone yourself? Well, you're going to delegate, but the point is, before you can actually delegate, you're going to have to train, which means actually showing people. Because, like I said, I grew up working with my hands, thought that I was going to work with my hands forever. There is nothing wrong with an entrepreneur and a manager using their hands. It's just, from my perspective, you use your hands to show other people what to do. You use your hands to step in to get a team or one of your employees over the hump of an in particular task that they're doing. It's not something that you actually lead with. So it is always remembering that if you are going to try to quote unquote clone yourself, well, then you have to start by showing, training, establishing an expectation, and then delegate it. But where most people are like, okay, well, I delegate it and then it gets fucked up. Just maybe you are having unrealistic expectations, because there are levels of delegation. The example that I'm going to use is pretty remedial, but my point is, a lot of the things that I learn and the concepts that are out there, I'm really trying to dumb them down and get them into layman's terms, because there are times where I will listen to concepts and I got to go back and re-listen to them in order to actually grasp it. But the point being, let's say you need to delegate somebody to do dishes. Okay, well, if somebody has never done dishes before, just telling them, go over there and do dishes, you're setting yourself up for failure. You have to go over to them and in a commercial setting explaining, wash, rinse, sanitize. These are the steps that you actually take it through. Do something right the first time, which means when you are washing, make sure that you are scrubbing or touching or washing 360 degrees of the actual dish or container that you're actually using. and then rinse it off thoroughly before dipping it in the sanitizer. And then personally, inside of my operation, I just have a personal paranoia inside the coffee junkies and pizza junkies about having any residue. So I want them to take that 4-step. I want them, after they sanitize it, to rinse it before they put it off to be dried. But the point is, you have to show them and you have to train them on what it truly means to do dishes, and then delegate. Okay, do dishes. Well, the first time that you delegate, you check up on them periodically to make sure that they are doing it correctly. First level of delegation. Why? Because you're making sure that the principles are actually, that they're comprehending them, that they're doing them correctly. You can't just take somebody from not knowing them and just say, go do this, and expect it to be done. You are setting yourself up for failure. So your first level of delegation is to tell them to go do dishes, and then continually check up on them through the process to make sure that the dishes are actually being done correctly. Once that individual has shown through periodic checkups that they at least initially knew how to do it correctly, then the next time you to delegate and tell them to do dishes, you let them do the dishes in totality, and then you go check up on the end result to actually make sure they in fact did the dishes. Now you have gotten to a second level of delegation. Congratulations. Now you're actually getting to the delegation that is going to give you freedom, because they have now developed a reputation for, they know exactly what to do. They know exactly how to duplicate it. The third level of the delegation is going to be able to say, I need you to do the dishes. And then you don't have to think about it anymore. And there's where, in fact, you actually gain the freedom itself. But if you just told them first time around, go do the dishes, and you didn't think about it anymore, because to you, common sense is, hey, do dishes. Now you're taking them for granted. You're taking the process for granted. You're not putting enough coaching and training. My point being, to delegate, you are using your ears, your eyes, and your mouth, and your hands. And you do it through levels until you have enough trust. They have developed enough of a reputation in this task that they're actually going to get it done. So it is a stair-stepping to get to delegating to freedom, is what I'm getting at. If you can take that premise for dishes, you can take that premise into any system that you need executed in your business. And yes, it takes a little bit more time up front, but if you are showing them and checking on them periodically, and then showing them and then checking the work, then you can move towards showing them or asking them to do something, and then not having to think about it, so that you can actually move on to the next thing. And the fourth thing that I'm going to say on that is, when you have somebody in your operation that has shown that you can show them and check up periodically, second time around, show them and check up on the end result, third time, you can ask them to do it, and you know that it gets done. You come back around, because, I mean, as an owner, your head better be on a swivel. You're always checking to see if somebody's not trying to shortchange. If they are not, then you need to find a way to pay them more. And I'm saying it like that because through the entire process, if somebody's actually doing the job correctly, praise them, thank them for doing the job correctly, let them know that they are appreciated. But the reason that you pay them more is because of your time invested and the replacement cost. If they walk and you bring in somebody else, you now have to start that process all over again, starting with the dishes and then moving through the systems of your actual business. So if you go through those steps enough times with enough systems in your business, you actually start to gain that freedom that you're looking for. But it is a process, and part of the manager or the entrepreneur that gets to the point of saying, I should just do it myself. That is not a them problem. It is a you problem, because you are not walking somebody through a system and a process of gaining the trust and ensuring they know what the actual tasks of the job are to be done, and then turning them loose. Now, I'm not going to deny you're going to get some people that you walk them through the steps. They should know how to do it. Well, when you check up on them at the end of the task and it's not done correctly, now you need to go backwards. You go backwards a second time because, hey, maybe some people need to be told a second time before they comprehend something. And if you go back to that second time, that you walk them through it and spot check as you're going through it. And then you walk them back to the second time of now you're going to check their work. And at the end of it, that is a violation of trust, and you need to get them out of your system if they are not capable of doing that on the second time around, because ultimately you are paying people to come in and execute processes and systems in your business, and ultimately you take on all of this risk and all of the pressure and responsibility for managing people. That this is just the back half of the business. I'm just talking about the fulfillment and the culture that you're actually trying to build into the business itself. This doesn't have anything to do with the forward facing, actually dealing with the customer. So if you're going to take on all of this responsibility, I'm sitting here giving you a 3-step process to train, teach, and let somebody follow through with something. And if they can do that in a 1, 2, 3 step, well, then you just start running them through all of the systems themselves. And if you have to go back, because sometimes you will, and run them through that process for a particular system a second time, there's nothing wrong with it. But much the same way that I say everybody deserves a second chance in life, I'm just sitting here telling you, I've given many third chances. I don't know whether I pull on my own heartstrings or whether I let people's sob stories pull on the heartstrings. I've never found anybody that has ever been worth giving a third chance. So I'm telling you, in this process, here's your first chance, get it done. They don't get it done. Go back and do it a second time. And if they cannot get your process by a second time where you can actually ask them to do something and know that you don't have to worry about whether it's going to get done, don't worry about the third time. Just replace them and find somebody else. And I'm just being honest. I'm just being very candid that when you go into business, you are, in fact, looking for freedom. The type of industry you get in, the type of business you get in, the type of geographical area that you're operating in, all of these are going to be determining factors to the amount of wealth that you can build. But the bigger point is, like all business owners, get into business to achieve some level of freedom. And in order to do that, your life is going to get harder in the beginning, but you train people up and you transfer skills, you transfer knowledge so that these people can do this, so that you can make sure that your time and effort is focused on more high value things like bringing more customers, bringing more revenue in the actual door. And as you bring more revenue in the door, then you bring another individual in the door. Then you hire a manager. Then you teach the manager to do the exact same things. You go out, you bring in more customers, you bring in more revenue in the door, then you bring in another employee, then you put somebody else in front of that manager to, in fact, do the same thing. The point being, over time, by running through that process, you actually get the freedom that you're looking for. But there does come a time where you got to call no joy. And that just means being willing to, in a certain sense, just get very cold and very matter of fact and tell somebody, you're just not a good fit for this business or my style of management and leadership, and I'm going to go another direction, and literally go another direction and find somebody else. Because I'm telling you, after 18 years in building multiple $million businesses, you're going to have turnover. People are going to fail. Being in food and beverage, there are certain things that are inside of my menu on this side of it, because I've got a couple B2B businesses where it's not the principles of turnover and of training, they're a little bit different. But the point is, like my Coffee Junkies menu, I only have a half a dozen base products, but you can mix those half a dozen base products 1,000 different ways to produce 1,000 different cups. That is not right for everybody. That requires a lot of muscle memory. That requires it requires a certain kind of individual. If you continue to invest your time and money in the wrong type of individual, all you are doing is flushing money down the drain, and thereby inevitably you're going to have to start the process all over again, and then you are being your own worst enemy because you're pushing yourself that much further away from the freedom that you're looking to obtain. Okay, I'm not gonna belabor. I'm not gonna beat a dead horse. I think that, again, some of this stuff seems to come as common sense because I've long said, like, you have got to train your people. You have got to coach your people. You have to develop your people. You have to pour into your people And if you're doing it from this is how I would do it, well, then you are in fact cloning yourself, and you will get to that level of freedom. But it's a repeated process, and it's not with the same person. It's a repeated process with multiple people. And just like advertising, people need to hear things over and over again before they realize it is not just the message of the day, that it is core values. Because as an entrepreneur, as an owner, you are responsible for the culture inside of your organization. So own it, do it, use your mouth, use your eyes and your ears and your mouth to train and to coach and to hold people accountable and ensure they are following a process to produce a consistent result for an extended amount of time so that you can focus on driving more revenue into your business. Okay, that is my podcast. And if it resonates, please share the show. If you know somebody that needs to hear it, again, please share the show. I've been working on some lines for what my purpose is for this podcast, but that when I look at it, I mean, like all the leadership that I've respected, and the only style of leadership that I know is servant style leadership. So by and large, I'm doing this because these are issues that I'm walking through with my own teams and my own members of management. These are steps that I am repeating, whether it be to train up my actual managers or to get in and do it myself and show the managers this is how you actually train somebody up, and this is how you get that freedom. Because as a manager, they'll get frustrated and pull their own hair out, and I'm like, quit being, you are becoming your own worst enemy. And too many people, like, they get frustrated in the training process. And I'm like, well, if you don't put more time in the training process, you're never going to get to that better place, which is inevitably lower turnover and people that, that's the more time people work with each other, the more they gel. So the less turnover you have, the more time you have for a whole team to resonate with each other and actually move the ball down the road. So spend more time coaching, teaching, training, talking, and you will get further down the road with your team. All right. Till next time, you guys have a good night.